Alrighty. Let me mount that. Let's see who's there. I'll do a first commercial break. I'll do a walkthrough of what I think motivated this guy. The guy in New Zealand, I mean. Here we go. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. It is the Dark Secret Place. Of course, that K-pop coming out of your radio means only one thing. That Los Angeles' #1 Saturday night show is on, and KFI's most downloaded podcast, The Dark Secret Place. Your weekly look at the war on terror, wars of the future, wars of the past. A great story, by the way, third hour. A great story that maybe you've probably never heard of before, but if you've seen The Sound of Music, then you have to hear the story. A World War I submarine story. But that's in the third hour. Obviously, 2 days ago, the terrorist act on 2 mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand, the main town there on the South Island. Lovely town, by the way. Is still reeling and rocking New Zealand. The guy was arraigned today, and their courts worked, I guess, over the weekends. And I tweeted some of that stuff out. We'll talk about that and the potential motives, as if it's really important. I don't, you can probably figure out, because the guy said himself, both via Twitter and all the social media that he utilized to send out his message and his manifesto, which was, well, I'll give you some thoughts on that here coming up, because is this guy a precursor of something that's coming? He did one thing that was different and a little jarring. And keep in mind, and this is context I haven't heard from anyone else in the media on this. Having seen over the past 5 years, ISIS set a new level for horror in high definition, then maybe perhaps we're numbed, we're desensitized to this kind of thing. ISIS videoing their assaults on Syrian positions or on Kurdish positions or Iraqi positions, ISIS decapitating people and doing it with multiple camera angles and extremely high production value. The ISIS really set a new level for slick gore. The beheadings, especially, the costumes that they were using. Then later on, the immolation of the Jordanian F-16 pilot, parading him through the streets of Raqqa with the soundtrack and all that. And the reason I mention it is because I don't think without that precursor, without ISIS setting a new standard of standing out and making videos that many European ISIS members have admitted they thought were slick, exciting. It made it feel like they were like Islam and Islamic men were striking back finally at the West, and it was a recruiting tool. They've admitted that, and the stuff was slick. I think without any of that, I don't think this guy would have thought, you know what I'll do? I will live stream this. I will mount a GoPro camera, and it will. I'll use it for YouTube Live, and the other Facebook Live, etc. He had a couple different feeds going on, and he telegraphed what he was about to do in the hours beforehand on Twitter. He uploaded his manifesto, the whole thing, and I watched the video because it's my job to watch the video, not because there's any kind of prurient interest on my part or any sort of macabre desire to see any death that I haven't already seen with my own eyes. It's because it's my job. Because how he did this is part of my analysis on this, and so that's the reason I watched it. And here's the thing: not only did I watch it, but I had a friend give me a heads up about this guy as the video was going, because when the guy uploaded this stuff to 4chan and it went on Facebook, in certain orbits, in certain circles on Twitter and other communication methods, people alert each other very, very quickly. And so when I was alerted to what apparently was the precursors to a lone wolf attack, and the first thing I saw were still pictures on Twitter of 30 and 40 round magazines, which I knew right off the bat, that's not normal in New Zealand. It says abnormal in New Zealand as it is in California. In New Zealand, yeah, you can have an AR-15. You can have an M4 style, a military style AR-15, a shorter AR-15. But they are legally mandated to 7-round magazines. Here in California, it's 10-round magazines. But this guy had 30 and 40-round magazines. And on the magazines, he had written the names of either anti-Muslim shooters like Alexander Bissonnette, Luca Traini, or European heroes who had historically fought Islamic invasions, whether it was the Battle of Vienna, etc. So this was, by the way, I'm on Twitter looking at this while the guy's live video has him driving down the street in Christchurch, and he's playing. There's various songs in his playlist, and what I didn't see till later when I watched it again was when he began. He said, "This is sort of an internet joke. It's an internet meme," but he said, "Subscribe to PewDiePie." Okay, there's a Swedish guy named PewDiePie, and he's been accused of some sort of shadow, subtle anti-Semitism in the past. But what you need to know about PewDiePie is that he's one of the number one YouTube channels in the world. I want to say he's got over 50 million subscribers, something like that. So through YouTube, the guy makes about $4 million per month on his YouTube channel. And it doesn't mean literally subscribe to PewDiePie. It's become just sort of a meme, kind of a joke. So he said, subscribe to PewDiePie as he was leaving, as he started on his journey when he started the live stream. And then one of the songs that he had on his playlist that came up as he was approaching the mosque was the March of the Grenadier Guards, a very famous British march. And at this point, I'm looking at his Twitter feed, and he had taken pictures of his bulletproof vest, his magazines, and as he pulled up into this alley, he began preparing his weapons. His weapons, the magazines are black with white writing, like almost like whiteout, or one of those white paint, like felt tips that are actually paint that you do graffiti with or something. The actual physical weapon was also marked up like this, with the Marshal Kazimierz Potocki, who was the hero of 1863, and he has the name Shipka Pass. Shipka Pass was a famous battle in 1877 when Russian and Bulgarian forces turned the Ottomans back around in the Balkans. So he has these names of prior shooters like Bissonnette. I haven't seen Breivik, Anders Breivik, by the way. And then famous battles Battle of Vienna, and all that. And it's pretty obvious what's about to happen if if you know what you're looking at. And I knew what I was looking at from those pictures. That the guy had icons. He had icons of the anti-Muslim movement. He had icons in history, and he was driving somewhere in what was identified as Christchurch. He then gets out of the car with one of his AR-15s and then a semi-automatic shotgun, all legally owned. And remember, keep in mind, he's an Australian. He can't own this stuff in Australia. In New Zealand, you can. It was Australia that had the massacre in Tasmania, where within weeks they passed a legislation to disarm everybody because there's no Second Amendment in Australia. In New Zealand, you can have this stuff. So he has this stuff. He goes into the mosque where he kills approximately 40. In 6 minutes or so, he leaves and he goes to another mosque where he killed 7 more and then lost his nerve or whatever. And this guy, just like Anders Breivik, was taken alive with his manifesto up on 8chan and 4chan and Mediafire, all these different online cloud services. And then over the next couple hours, it was all taken down. YouTube took down every single iteration of that video they could find. It was getting bounced around all over the place. If it was on YouTube, YouTube took it down. If it's on Facebook, Facebook took it down. 4chan, the rest of them took it down. And he was in custody. So what was his motive? Well, do you really need me to explain that to you? You know, I really don't think you do. But what is New Zealand's reaction? And what is the reaction of the Islamic world and the rest of it? And like I say, is in the guy's manifesto, was he hoping for copycats? Was he hoping to start a movement? What was his goal? What was his own stated goal? I'm going to take his word for it, that what he said in his manifesto was his goal. I'm not going to look for any sort of subtext. Not when I have the text in front of me in bright yellow. We'll be back right after this, by the way. Live streaming on the YouTube. If you go to unsheepyourself.com, you can go to the YouTube channel and you can watch what I'm about to do here in the commercial. So I'm going to walk you through from Anders Breivik through the painted up magazines and all that, what went on, and that's here on the live stream. So I'll give you a chance to get on the live stream, and we'll do it during the commercials. Back right after this. How quickly can New Zealand disarm? I will tell you when we come back. We'll be back right after this. It is a Dark Secret Place. Brian Suits in here until 11 p.m. KFI AM 640. More stimulating talk. Michael Chappelle with the news. Okay. Okay, so 22 July 2011. Anders Breivik, who is now 40, here he is, as you see, with a wetsuit and an M14. This is a picture that he took by himself. Wetsuit, M14, and he's got it accessorized to the hilt. He's got a bayonet lug with a bayonet. He's got a bipod, 2 flashlights, and he's thinking, hey, wow, I'm tactical. So on 22 July 2011, Breivik set off a car bomb in downtown Oslo in government buildings, killing several people, and it sucked all the Norwegian authorities into Oslo. In the meantime, he drove up to a ferry dock off of an island, which was a summer camp for the children of the Norwegian Labour Party. It was a political summer camp. It was where kids get indoctrinated, teenagers get indoctrinated to be just like their parents and be very liberal and multicultural and the whole thing, just like Democrats here in the United States. Breivik's plan was to go on that island, his motive, and kill as many kids as he could. His motive was that Norway has been taking in hundreds of thousands of Islamic immigrants, refugees from around the Islamic world, and it's been changing Norwegian society in tremendous ways. And there's a whole lot of people in Norway who sympathize with Breivik, because it's one thing if 1 million Danes come into Norway, Norwegian society is not going to be really radically changed. But if 1 million Algerians and Syrians and Muslims come in, it will change Norwegian society. Well, it was the Norwegian Labour Party that said, well, we have to do this because we are a humane nation. We have to become multicultural. Keeping in mind that Norway, like Iceland and Sweden, prior to all this immigration, was virtually homogenous. The Norway was filled with Norwegians. Iceland is one of the most racially pure places on earth. And Breivik was one of millions of Norwegians who saw this and they said, I'm not ready for a cop who doesn't speak Norwegian. I'm not ready to be excluded from certain parts of my town and all that. He possibly reflected the fact that Norway wasn't ready for multi-ethnic democracy like America always has been. So anyway, that's Breivik. Breivik's sentence, by the way, after killing 77 kids plus the ones killed in the bomb, doing anti-state terrorism, his sentence was 21 years. 21 years preventive detention. So he'll be out sometime in his 50s. So these are the magazines that Breton Tarrant carried. As you see, these are Magpul 40s and 30s. And Alexander Bissonnette is a French killer of Muslims. Novak Vujocevic is a Balkan hero against Muslims. He wore this body armor with a Viking sun wheel, but more importantly, even though this was originally a Viking rune, it was co-opted by the SS in World War II. So he had that picture up. This was his route. The camera went on here. He took about 7 minutes to get to the mosque. He lights up the mosque for about 6 or 7 minutes, then he drives here, and the camera went off there, as you see there. That's in the middle of Christchurch. And he is now in custody, and they're saying he will do one of the longest sentences that Norway has ever handed out. There's another effect, and that is gun sales in New Zealand are through the roof this weekend because the prime minister there is talking about changing the laws as soon as Monday. So that's your quick visual walkthrough. How much time? Yeah, I don't know if that's what the guy was trying to do. In the video, it looks to me like he's trying to get out of the way, but it could be that he was rushing him. I would tell you more conclusively, but they took the video away because before Tarrant can start shooting at him, he's going off to an angle. But at the other mosque, what happened was a guy picked up one of the as the guy emptied a weapon, like as he walked up to the mosque, he emptied out. He had a semi-automatic shotgun with a drum magazine, and he just went bang, 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 bang. And when it was out, he dropped it. He literally physically dropped it, and he went to his M4, and he started clearing the hallway. People are running. He gets into the main room of worship, and people had fled to one end or the other. So he started concentrating on one side, and on the other side, people were just cowering. And so if somebody had rushed him, he did some pretty clumsy magazine changes. And he did not, he wasn't changing mags really cleanly. So there at the first mosque, he was there for a total of about 7 minutes total. But he's not prior military. He's a prior personal fitness coach. Because you can see him today in the arraignment. He's short but muscular, and he was doing the upside down OK sign, which is a white supremacist thing. But according to his manifesto, his goal, by the way, was to have repercussions all the way into the United States, because he wants American society to start breaking into ethnic groups. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. It is the dark secret place. Brian sits in here until 11 o'clock. Next hour, they want to scrap a aircraft carrier 25 years before it's supposed to be out of service. And who wants to do that? Well, not the Navy. So the answer may surprise you. Plus some skullduggery, a blast from the past. A very key witness in a very high-profile trial in Europe dies of radiation poisoning. So we will get to that. On Twitter at Dark Secret Place, and the arraignment of the man Brenton Tarrant, a 28-year-old, I guess a former personal fitness coach. He's a buff little guy. It's hard to get the scale on this. The two New Zealand cops who are flanking him in the picture are a head higher than him. So I don't know if that means he's a short little dude or they just got two big, intimidating guys. In his arraignment this morning, as per New Zealand law, they pixelated out his face. But even though his hands are handcuffed in front of him, his hands sort of at pelvis area, he was flashing the upside down OK sign, which has now become this white supremacist, primarily European thing around the world, being taken, having a photo taken posing with that. And it's also an Australian thing. So anyway, the man charged over the Christchurch mosque shootings faces an unprecedented prison term if found guilty. Brenton Tarrant appeared in Christchurch District Court on Saturday morning. The prosecutor, who specializes in murder, said the offender was likely to face an extraordinary minimum non-parole term if found guilty of the shooting. We don't know what that means, though, because if you recall 2011, July 2011, Anders Breivik, the Norwegian who'd had it up to here with immigration and multiculturalism, set off a bomb in a government building in downtown Oslo as a MacGuffin. It drew in police and fire. And in the meantime, he headed to this island where the Norwegian Labour Party sent their kids for a summer camp, a political summer camp. Well, he could have gone to some neighborhood in Oslo and killed Muslims like this guy did, but he was a head above that. He wanted to perpetrate a massacre against the Labour Party, which had instituted these policies that he disagreed with, the multi-culti, as they called them, policies, and the policies of wholesale immigration from Muslim countries, which Breivik and many Norwegians, to be fair, credited with fundamentally changing Norwegian society. Keep in mind, Norway is basically a mono-ethnic country. It was filled with Norwegians until about 20 years ago. And so that's who he blamed. And so, but he intended to be taken alive. He had written a manifesto and he intended to be taken alive because he wanted to make a political statement. I think this guy, by self-identifying, saying, make no mistake, this is a terrorist act. He said that in his manifesto. He did not intend to die in a shootout with police. His intent was for a high-profile public trial. Anyway, Breivik wound up killing a total of 77 people on that day, on 22nd July 2011. His sentence in a Norwegian jail is 21 years. He went in, he's currently 40 years old. He went in there in his mid-30s, well, 2011. So he'll be out in his 50s. You know, that's in Norway. Even the Norwegians, or even liberal Norwegians, were saying, can we just do the death penalty just maybe one time? And then they said, no, that would to completely remove what makes us Norwegian, the whole thing. So anyway, a mass murderer gets out in 21 years. I can't find out what the minimum is going to be for him. The best speculation, the longest sentence given to a multiple murderer in modern times in New Zealand was the 30-year non-parole term given to a guy who killed 3 people and left another close to death in a gun attack. So this guy kills now. By the way, the death toll is up to 50 because they had forensically they'd closed the main mosque where 40 were killed, and as they were going through it forensically and slowly removing the bodies, they found another. So the total is 50. And then the other issue here is the Muslims they traditionally bury their dead within 24 hours. So they want the bodies released. And it's not like there's a lack of evidence. This guy is going to probably in trial admit to doing this. So he is going to get, all of the handsome accoutrement of New Zealand trials and the whole thing, just like he would here in this country, because they have no leverage against the guy. In the United States, Timothy McVeigh got a death sentence. They offered him for a guilty plea to take it off the table. He didn't want it, so then they said, right, you're going to get it either way, knowing full well that it would take decades before Timothy McVeigh was put to death. But Timothy McVeigh, with his political trial, he surprised everybody because he told his lawyers to stop appealing. So he probably had one of the fastest gavel to gas chamber or lethal injection death sentences that anyone has seen in the federal government. But this guy is not going to die in prison, believe it or not. In New Zealand, they just don't have that. They just don't have life. They don't have LWOP. Here in this country, in this state, you can murder one person, and as long as you plan to do it and you had an illegal weapon and all that, you can get LWOP. But this guy won't. So what motivated him? Well, to put it really, really simply, in Western Europe and in Australia, where tremendous amounts of Muslim immigrants are more highly visible than they are here in this country, because we're a nation of 330 million, and Islamic immigration is not changing our society. Our society changes like the tide. When Germans come in, Italians come in this part of the country, there's parts of California that are indistinguishable from parts of Mexico, between Grapevine and Bakersfield. If you take the shortcut to Bakersfield, you go through like towns like Delano. Is it Delano? And you don't see English. Delano. Yeah, and but in this country, because we are a nation of immigrants, you don't complain about it. This is just the way it works. Maybe in 10 years, Burmese are going to overrun California, and you won't be able to see English because all the signs will be in Burmese. That's just the way this country is. It's how it works. It's a significant issue in Norway, in Belgium, and France, and in Australia, and apparently now New Zealand. And do these guys communicate with each other? Do they motivate each other? We'll see. More on that. And also, how is New Zealand going to react firearms-wise? That and more coming up. It's the Dark Secret Place. Brian Suits in here until 11 o'clock. KFI AM 640. More stimulating talk. Michael Chappé with the news.
The offender was
selected tomorrow for the NCAA Men's Division I basketball tournament. The single elimination tournament holds 67 games over a 19-day span, hence the name March Madness. It'll end with the Final Four and championship game in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Yeah, it's just a persistent cough. I'm fine. I need it to go away. It's like an upper
Tennessee
chest infection.
That's about it at KFI News.
Some internet amoxicillin should do it.
This is messing with your drive on the 605.
You know that the stuff that you buy on it's called fish mox. It's amoxicillin. It's the same amoxicillin that you get prescribed, but it's like a tenth of the cost. So I've got a bunch of amoxicillin in my house. I got to do Solar Max without coughing. Now I don't do cigarettes. I don't smoke. I have a pipe, but I don't smoke. My dad was an air traffic controller. He smoked. Showtime. Hey, Brian Suits here for SolarMax Tech. You may have heard that utility companies and the government recently stopped their solar rebate programs. SolarMax has not. They're so committed to getting those panels in your house, they're making up for the lost utility savings themselves with their own Solar for All rebate through the end of March. SolarMax's Solar for All rebate combined with federal tax incentives gives you one last shot to get the historic savings of up to 35%. That can save you an average of up to $7,500 off of your solar energy system. And then the minute it's installed, you start saving on your electric bill. SolarMax can make this offer because they're the only solar company doing their own financing. They have in-house financing in the factory where they make the panels. So yeah, they're the only ones who can say that too. They make their panels in Riverside, which is still in America. They do everything for themselves. World-class roofers, installation, design, panel assembly, all of it. You get maximum savings. They don't have to ship from the factory. They are the factory. Don't miss your chance to save up to $7,500 of solar. Reserve your rebate now because Solar for All expires at the end of March. So dial pound 250 in your cell phone now and say keyword SolarMax, pound 250 SolarMax, or go to solarmaxtech.com. Subject to credit approval. CSLB number 9722048.
Weather from KFI. We're going to see clear skies, lows in the 50s tonight, and sunshine. Mostly sunny, almost as warm for Monday, and partly cloudy Tuesday. Highs upper 60s to mid 70s. Chance of rain at 50% comes in Wednesday. We lead local live from the KFI 24 hours.
So hey, Loco Boy, how do I know you? Are you using a code word? Can you give me other any other identifying clues? Because you mentioned Tuatha.
Mediterranean salmon, even vegetarian options like sweet potato fajitas. And they deliver all of it to your doorstep. It's pre-measured. All you have to do is follow the recipe. It couldn't be
Really? Is it Jackie Chan? Were you wearing a cervical collar?
It takes 20 to 30 minutes to prepare a legitimately high-end meal. I pay north of $40 per head for meals like this in fine dining restaurants. And this is under $10 per serving.
Oh, okay. What's up, man?
For $20 off your first 3 boxes, visit HelloFresh.com.
You know that I love you so much. We got a dog. We got this awesome dog, a big Catahoula leopard dog, and I named him after you. I mean, no shit. And he just died about a month ago. It's an inside joke. If you knew who I was talking about, you would get the Jackie Chan thing. So how you doing? How's the old
Rescue Rooter quiz time. Okay, these are the things you can put down in garbage disposal. Onion skins, oats, asparagus, and the answer, none of them. Trust me, I've tried.
Yeah, he was a great dog. He was my daughter's dog. Speaking of Holt, there's this movie on Netflix right now called Triple Frontier,
And respond in 7 minutes or less.
where former Special Forces guys.
Dial pound
Wait, how much time do we have?
12 seconds. Or go to Rescue Rooter. Did you get it?
Yeah, can you get it? And Holt wrote that book, right? This movie totally rips it off. It's hilarious. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. It is the Dark Secret Place. Brian Suits in here till 11 o'clock. The aftermath of what happened in New Zealand, just like the mass shooting some 25 years ago in Australia. is being hailed in America on Twitter and social media as, see, that's what a rational country does about guns. But believe it or not, in New Zealand, a lot of people are saying that why are we having our rights taken away because one guy abused them? And unlike here in the United States, they don't have a Second Amendment as a speed bump to stop the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, from doing what she wants to do on Monday. You know what? You know what's happening right now in New Zealand? Just like when Obama was elected and then reelected, there's a rush on gun stores. A lot of gun stores who don't open up on weekends are opening up on weekends because people want to purchase weapons because there is pressure to call for an immediate ban on sales of semi-automatic rifles and shotguns because this is what the guy used. The Prime Minister spoke about the suspect and about weapons and weapon law earlier this morning. This is Jacinda Ardern.
The offender was in possession of a gun license. I'm advised that this was acquired in November of 2017. A lever-action firearm was also found. While work is being done as to the chain of events that led to both the holding of this gun license and the possession of these weapons, I can tell you one thing right now. Our gun laws will change. There have been attempts...
Bottom line, she intends to restrict the sale of firearms because of this. And that's what Australia did. And I don't know. I don't know if it's too soon for Lincoln jokes, but I just want to contrast the United States with New Zealand. Is it a time machine? Does it go backwards and stop this from happening? No. And in Australia, there are still guns. And guess who has them? Guess who have them? People who the government never licensed to have them. Because as it turns out, law-abiding people turned their weapons in 25 years ago in Australia. And you can expect that in New Zealand. New Zealand has a tiny crime rate because it doesn't have a very large population. I mean, proportionally, New Zealand has concentrated violence in Wellington and Christchurch, but not a lot of firearm violence because it's hard for criminals. If you have a prior conviction, it's hard for criminals to get a hold of them because legal owners are required to lock them up and the whole thing, just like here in California. But the main thing is in New Zealand and Australia, they don't have a Second Amendment as a speed bump. As I say, in this country, if this happened, even if President Kamala Harris signed an emergency declaration, you would still get an injunction from the Supreme Court. It would still go to a court and it would never be, no one's going to kick your door down and get a weapon. It couldn't happen. You would have to change the Constitution. And yes, that takes 10 years and it takes 3/4 of the state legislatures, et cetera. The process for changing the Constitution is intentionally difficult. And the Second Amendment is there because the framers, the founders of this country, were coming out of a revolution that was only possible because the citizens were armed. And they don't care about the scenario down the road. So when the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes tell me all about, what are you going to do? Or Bill Handel saying, well, what are you going to do about tanks? What about tanks? Well, you know, Ceausescu had tanks. And every dictator had tanks until they killed themselves. And there is a scenario, a horrible scenario down the road where America is in civil war, and somehow the thinking is that the American military as a bloc, somehow supports the government. Believe me, many of them would be the first to turn against a tyrannical American government. But that's the purpose of the Second Amendment. Is when a horrible tragedy happens because of an individual like this psycho in Vegas, our government has a mechanism that they can't turn. And if they could turn that mechanism, it would be tantamount to admitting that you're all of you legal gun owners, you're capable of doing what the guy in Vegas did. When if that really happened, if that really were the case, in a nation of 330 million, with well over 300 million firearms in private possession, something like Vegas would be happening every 2 or 3 days. But it doesn't. It actually doesn't. For the penetration of firearms in this country, the rather remarkable low rate of homicide in the overwhelming number of American counties is pretty remarkable. So I don't want to go down that road in response to what happened to this tragedy in New Zealand. But I'm just pointing out, this is what can happen when the people who wrote your Constitution don't think it's that important for the citizens to be able to defend themselves and that the government should have all the guns. What motivated the guy? Well, because I get contacted by these people all the time. And I tell them, listen to my show, you'll find out I'm not interested. But in Europe, as I hinted at in the last break, there are a lot of young white males who are seeing the country that they're reading about in history books and all that being changed fundamentally because their country's identity, the identity of Italy, the identity of Germany, the identity of Belgium or Holland, or in this case, New Zealand, they detect it's changing. And that while current liberal and politically correct narratives blame the white male for everything, in Europe, that is not only going on, but there's another layer. And that layer is your country is going to be taken away from you by the politicians allowing immigration from Muslim countries. And whether or not your country can absorb that immigration successfully, like we do in this country, and by and large, if you know anything about your history of France, they've been very unsuccessful in assimilating and absorbing Muslim immigration. And this is because, for one thing, France used to have a gigantic colony in Algeria, and every Algerian had a French passport. And the French wrapped their arms around them and said, we're all Frenchmen. Don't you understand? Why would you rebel against us? I don't care if it's 1958. We're all French. Come on. And then after they gave up Algeria, then all of a sudden, they're on their third and fourth generation of Algerian in France, and they're not French. They're finding out that was a lie. They're not all Frenchmen. They just have a French passport. And so for a lot of white young men in Europe, they're seeing what they've been told is their identity, and it's being taken away from them. So there are thousands of guys like Tarrant in New Zealand who exist in Europe, and they're forming underground and things like that. And every once in a while they come out in the open. If you think Charlottesville was shocking, then you should see what happens in Eastern Germany, around Leipzig, what used to be East Germany. You know, the West Germans saw Turks coming in from the 50s on. And they worked in Volkswagen, worked in factories, and they got used to it. The East Germans, pretty much overnight in 1990, began seeing people who were not German all over Germany. So the real fundamentalist, neo-Nazi guys are in Eastern Europe. But that's their motivation. Their motivation is that they think they're seeing their country taken away from them. That's why this guy festooned his weapon, his body armor, and his magazines with the names of anti-Muslim crusaders, successful European generals and leaders who fought against Islam, and then modern day killers. So the motivation is not real hard to find. And yes, it's out there. And also, yes, it is a pushback on some of the ultra glossy cinematic violence that ISIS has been shoving down the internet for the past 5 or 6 years. That's why I'm here to tell you this guy wore a GoPro. So the New Zealanders can't silence him. He's going to have a public trial, just like Breivik. He's going to say all this stuff, and in his manifesto, tell you. We'll take a break, and I'll tell you what his cunning plan was. He thought something far other than what's going to happen in New Zealand was going to happen. So we'll get to that here in just a second. It's the Dark Secret Place. Brian Suit's in here until 11 o'clock talking about the New Zealand massacre of 2 days ago. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. Michael Chappé with the news.
A man that left a package burning at the Westfield Century City Mall. They say that package did not contain explosives. The guy will likely face charges of arson if caught. The mall had to be evacuated for about 5 hours last night as police dealt with that situation. Urban search and rescue firefighters had to lower a rope to rescue stranded on a rock face in the Garden of the Gods area in Chatsworth. They got the
Look, I'm doing a Zoom.
around 2:30 this afternoon. The conditioning coach of the LA Rams has been busted on 3 counts of misdemeanor sexual battery. He's already posted bail. Theodore Rapp.
Uh-oh, my daughter's in the chat.
Charges in Ventura County. Check out your forecast from the driver oil side.
Are you still there?
Homeowners insurance is boring until you need it. And if you're like most homeowners, you
Loco Boy, are you still there?
have the coverage you thought it did. Hippo is changing that with smart insurance. at up to 25% less than you're currently paying. Checking your rate takes 60 seconds or less.
Hey, Reagan, Loco Boy.
But don't wait for that disaster to strike.
Loco Boy is the guy that we named your dog after. I don't want to say the name, so don't say the name. But Loco Boy is Sergeant the guy that we named your heroic dog after.
It's going to be lows in the 50s under clear skies and sunny again tomorrow. Highs in the 70s to the lower 80s. Crash in Inglewood to tell you about. This is on the 105.
That's a dolly track? Is that a dolly tracking shot?
Boulevard, that crash blocking the left lane. It's going to be a tough drive back to the 405. And in the Sepulveda Pass, 405 north at Getty Center Drive, a broken down car blocking the right lane. Traffic slows back to Santa Monica Boulevard. In Elysian Park on the 5 Stadium Way, looks like that earlier.
So that'll be a freeze frame.
There. In Norwalk, 605 south before the 105, crash still blocking the middle lane. They're having a tough time.
Actually, I should make a GIF out of that.
Jammed back to Slauson Avenue. KFI traffic is sponsored by
By the way, nobody say GIF.
KFI in the Sky helps.
Okay, it's a graphic interface or graphic internet fun, whatever it is. It's a GIF.
Invites you to take steps for cures at a walk event near you. Support the 1.6
Oh, I think they big. By the way, everyone, Loco Boy was at Tuatha. He was at Saddam's nuclear facility with me, and we had a tiny little like Vietnam fob, and its name was Yellow Cake because there were like 300 tons of yellow cake there, and its radio call sign was Yellow Cake. So, who's kidding who, huh?
Experience every moment again. Just get started at iHeartRadio.com. Our 2019 iHeartRadio Music Awards.
GIF.
Kelly here. I get it. Buying a car can be complicated as you sift through terms like MSRP, list price, dealer price. Here's where True Price from True Car makes all that go away. It's the exact price you'll pay for the car you want, including fees and accessories. It also shows you what others paid for the same car you wanted. So when you're ready to buy a new or used car, visit TrueCar.com for a more confident.
It's not an elbow kind of a thing.
Hey guys, it's Sue Costner, sexual health expert with a key tip for men. I noticed that guys often wonder.
So this is that's actually a window.
What do men really want? After hearing from thousands of men, the answer is very clear. Men want confidence in the bedroom. They want a partner and a voice that they
Behold, Burbank.
So I always recommend not to
Yeah, I'm gonna get a Dave and Buster's thing going
period. Not to drill so fast.
probably Thursday after next, Wednesday or Thursday after next.
That little blue pill on steroids.
So that's
You'll experience a newfound
our new thing there.
Call now and take advantage of the special free bottle offer. Oh, and as a word of caution, be ready.
That's the door.
Will lead to epic bedroom performance.
Find out how to get a free bottle of Noxitril. Call 1-800-993-2480. That's 800-993-2480. Free bottles for a limited time. So call now. 800-993-2480. That's 800-993-2480.
If you're looking for easy ways to save money, hurry into Ralph's for the digital coupon event. Just visit Ralph's.
I'm pretty proud of that.
And download your coupons. Then head to Ralph's for hot deals on select varieties of Starbucks coffee, Kroger brand shredded cheese, Tostitos, and more. Best of all, you
All right, I gotta get a
5 times in one transaction. So visit Ralph's.com and get more for less at the digital coupon event.
I gotta get a bumper ready.
Prices at Ralph's. Get ready to save big at Ralph's with 3 days of digital deals. Just visit the app or Ralph's.com right now and download your coupons. Then head to Ralph's Friday through Sunday for hot digital deals on select meat, cheese, snacks, candy, home products, and more.
Hey,
Use your coupons up to 5 times in one transaction.
Local boy,
Select varieties of
email me briansuits at iheartmedia.com, BRYAN, briansuits at iheartmedia.com.
prices at
I painted a pretty great painting of the dog. I'll send you a picture of it. But he was a really, really good boy.
He decided to return a box of corn checks to the cereal aisle. Just then, a young man holding 2 six-packs of Bud Light reached down and scooped a $5 bill off the floor. He told the old man he saw it fall out of his wallet. The man completed his purchase and left the store. That's when Don Cool saw the young man return one of his six-packs to the cooler. on that day, I would have offered that young man
What do we have? Like a minute? Another minute?
He cares about people, and I know he has.
About 40 seconds.
Okay.
Recognition, or if you don't want to care about people and have character, I want to meet you. You're going to love, absolutely love, working
All right, we're gonna do some
GUETTL.
Mavericks.
Nothing better, but it's hard to spell.
Here's a get out of Hollywood. My distracted this right now on the ground.
The CDC reports 26 million flu cases so far
In your neighborhood.
In Santa Ana, Steve Breivik, KFI News.
Live, local.
KFI. Radio station.
KFI AM 640 more stimulating talk. It is the Dark Secret Place. Brian sits in here until 11 o'clock. Next hour, skullduggery is afoot. And I'll give you a hint. Somebody, a team of dudes, you didn't hear about this, but in the days before the Hanoi summit with Kim Jong-un and Trump, a team of guys raided the North Korean embassy in Madrid, and they held it for 4 hours, and they got away. But what'd they get away with? And who in the heck are they? I'll tell you that next hour. Also, a key witness in a trial, a underage sex trial against a former NATO country's prime minister, croaked of a very familiar method. We'll get to that. The manifesto of the guy Brenton Tarrant, the New Zealand shooter, killer now of 50. They found another body today that was hidden apparently. His manifesto was about 28 pages, and you could tell that it was a guy who has been he's been scrotum deep in 4chan and 8chan and Reddit and everything, because his screed was filled with all sorts of copy and pasted stuff from the sort of European racist internet and things like that. And like I say, it devolved all the way down to him starting off his live video by saying subscribe to PewDiePie, which has become in itself, like I say, just sort of an internet joke. And that guy, by the way, whose real name was like Sven Kjellstad or something, he obviously he came out and completely denounced what the guy had done and the whole thing. But so anyway, in his manifesto, he states that what he wants to do is to create a backlash. He wanted to provoke Islamic terror backlash, hopefully in Europe, maybe in the United States, and that would lead to a need for revenge or backlash, and that would get America to wake up in regards to what's happening to the rest of the world. And he mentioned, for instance, American white birth rates versus Hispanic or black birth rates and all this. And I don't know if this guy's ever set foot in the United States. I don't know. But in the manifesto, he talks about he wants to restore a ethnically solid world where everyone gets to associate with people like themselves. And they don't have to associate with someone different. You don't have to have a mosque across the street, because they would have all the mosques in their part of the country or whatever. But he references the United States in the 1950s as the idyllic thing that he wants back, with Whitey in charge and all that. And so it was scrubbed pretty quickly, but of course there's copies all around. That's why the guy put it up on MediaFire and all these different cloud services. Plus there's a bunch of cloud services that you and I don't know about, and that's where he put them. But that was his genius plan, that massacring as many Muslims as he could would somehow have repercussions in the United States that would awaken the great white giant of the United States or something. And he made statements to the effect that Europe is done and things like that. And that, by the way, is a very prevalent statement amongst European white supremacists, that the corner's been turned, that the tide is turned, that Europe is gone, and that they cannot make up for the falling birth rate and the whole thing. So it was not terribly well thought out. And his only effect might be that he robs the peaceful citizens of New Zealand of any firearm rights whatsoever. So that's ultimately going to be his net effect. Looking back at the motivations, Breivik in Norway, he didn't think he was going to start some great European-wide movement. He did the act as the act itself. I've killed the children of the liberal politicians that did this to Norway. McVeigh's target was the ATF. The Oklahoma City ATF were the ones who did the Branch Davidian raid. Though at the end it was the FBI that made the call to burn the place down. But for McVeigh, he bombed the place to blame the ATF. And that was his statement. He wasn't going to try to start some great anti-government revolution or whatever. So he got what he wanted, and then he fast-tracked his way to the death penalty, which is an option that Breivik doesn't have because he only got a 21-year sentence. So we'll see. When Breivik gets out, he'll be in his 50s, and I don't know what Europe's going to look like in 10 years, but chances are Europe does one of two things. It continues absorbing Islamic immigrants, or it does what Europe does every couple generations for the past, 1,500 years. It goes crazy, and it rounds people up or it blames people for its troubles. So there's one of two Europes when Breivik gets out. When this guy in New Zealand gets out, he's 28. He like I say, New Zealand does not have life without parole. So unless this guy is shanked by a Kiwi in prison or something, he will probably get out maybe in his 60s or something, which is something anathema to the way that we think. All right, next hour, skullduggery is afoot. One dead due to a familiar method. Meanwhile, mystery people raid the North Korean embassy, and we weren't told about it last month. Well, I'll tell you about it next hour. It is the Dark Secret Place, hour number 2 coming up. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk.
KOSTHD, Los Angeles, Orange County. An iHeart radio station.
Not a threat. I'm Michael Superi from the KFI 24-hour newsroom. Officials say that air quality testing outside the Phillips 66 refinery in Carson did not detect.
I'm amber on battery. I'm almost red.
Outside the refinery perimeter. The AQMD says it also did tests and showed no problems. The fire happened at about 7
Fish mocks.
Food processing unit at the refinery on East Sepulveda Boulevard. It was declared a knockdown 2 hours later.
Yeah. Trudeau is undue influence and all that. Fish mocks. Go. Amazon won't sell it. You can buy it in Oregon, you can buy it in Nevada, you can buy it in Washington in actual PetSmarts. It's in the aquarium section because you literally drop a amoxicillin in the aquarium. But in California, you have to go online and search for Fishmox, Fishmox, and you can order amoxicillin. It is the same amoxicillin you get at Walgreens. It's just way, way cheaper. All right, I'll do my freeze frame.